Okay, what's happening? So today we're going to be doing lab exercise 12, Introduction to JavaScript. We'll do some JavaScript code in our web pages. So JavaScript is a language that allows you to do active content on pages. Basically, users click something and something happens. So first thing you want to do is download the lx12.txt file from Blackboard, or you can just use the same text that's here in the lab manual, starting with that header sun conure. Somehow there was an editing problem, but it's all the same text. Okay, so take that content and find an online web editor. I recommend the w3schools.com Triad editor. You can use that one and go here and select the front end editor, which allows JS for JavaScript. Okay, it's the same one we've been using before. So source code goes on the left. Just paste in that whole slug of text from that notepad file, and here it is. And you can run it, and you'll see, hey, there's some text, right? There's a header, there's a paragraph of text about that kind of bird, and there's 4 buttons at the bottom. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is show how to change some elements in a page. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is the onclick property. So anything that's clickable on a web page, you can give it an onclick property that specifies what's going to happen. And the basic format of that is onclick equals, and then inside quotes, whatever JavaScript kind of action you want to happen. So we're going to replace the label code, right, where it says here, button label button. We're going to put in a little extra stuff here. So instead of just leaving it as button, we're going to give it an onclick attribute. So onclick equals this dot inner HTML equals new label. Okay, and inside single and double quotes there. All right, so we'll first show you what it does, and then we'll break down what happens. So if we run this, that'll update the code over here. Now when we click on the label button, something's going to happen. Ta-da! Our label on that button changed to new label. I'm going to break down what happens here. So inside the quotes, inside the big quote, the double quotes, is the action that's going to happen. So this here means the same object that just got clicked. This is a general self-referential object term on web pages and in a lot of other languages too. So here it just means whatever thing got clicked, change the property of that object. Inner HTML is generally the code that appears in between the opening and closing tag of an HTML object. So here the text label is the inner HTML, and what we're going to do is replace it with the text new label. Now it's important here that you use single quotes because the single quotes then get distinguished from the double quotes for the entire onclick property. Okay, if we use double quotes here, then we would have an error because it would just think, this is, I'm going to replace it temporarily. Okay, it would think that this dot inner HTML equals is the entire onclick property, and it wouldn't know what to do with that. So it's important that we blend these things properly. Also, footnote, all your quotes in HTML, JavaScript need to be straight up and down vertical. So if you do some of that stuff in Microsoft Word that tends to automatically curl the quotes, it's going to be wrong. You want to use it with a kind of plain text application like Notepad. Okay, so that's all that stuff. Now, the second thing we're going to do is changing a different object. So when you're changing a different object, first of all, you have to give it an ID property so that other things can reference it. And then generally you're going to use the document.getElementById with the name of the attribute, or the name of the object rather, the name of the tag, and then whatever attribute you want to change. So document means the whole document, dot means the thing belonging to whatever element has a particular attribute. All right, so we're going to use a font tag. Font is a good one because it doesn't take up any space on the page. So font ID equals D1, and then close that out, font. Okay, so in this case, the ID of this font property, this font tag, is D1. So if we have some other button, for example, like in this Latin button, right? The old one used to say button Latin. We're going to replace it with onclick equals. Okay, so down here, onclick equals document dot get element by ID. p1 dot inner HTML equals, and then again, single quotes, Aratinga solstitialis. Solstitialis. Okay, so you didn't know you were going to get a Latin lesson today, but today, in fact, you are. Okay, so once again, what this is going to do is when you click on this Latin button, it's going to scan this document, find the tag who has the element ID D1. All right, so that's this font tag up here. And it's going to change its inner HTML property from whatever it is, in this case, nothing, to Aratinga solstitialis. All right, so we run this, update the code, click on the Latin button. Ta-da! Now we get that. Or was it supposed to be below it? Yeah, okay. I like it actually after. But the exercise is what it is. Okay. Now, next thing we're going to look at is functions. So these are very simple statements that we're doing. These are basically single JavaScript statements in the onclick properties. If you want something to be bigger, usually it's a good idea to group it together as a function. So first thing you'll do for that is you'll need to make a script tag. So you have a script tag somewhere on your page, and then the function will basically have the name of the function like this, and then in parentheses, some parameters, basically some data that gets sent along to specify how the function runs, and then any statements inside the function. And function calls can be triggered by a number of different events. Can be triggered by clicks, triggered by timers. You can set up ones that just automatically happen as soon as the page loads. So there's various ways in JavaScript you can get these functions to happen. All right, so when you want a function to be called, you just include the name of the function and any arguments you send along. Arguments are data that you send along to a function, right? Parameters are what you call them when they've been received. So we're going to give this opening paragraph tag an ID P1. Whoop. Okay, so we've done that. Now in the tag for the color button, we're going to include the property onclick equals G. Okay, so color onclick equals G, and the parentheses are important. It'll still work if you don't have the semicolon, but it's good form to include the semicolon, which is how you close out a JavaScript statement. Okay, so what this means is the function G will get called whenever that color button gets clicked. And the last thing we need to do is actually include the G function itself. So after, at the bottom of all your HTML code, put a script tag, and I'm just going to close it out right there. And then we can put something like function G document.get element by ID P1 style.color equals red, and close that out, and close out with the squiggly brackets. By the way, the squiggly brackets, they should be next to the P key on your keyboard. So that's where to find them. Anyway, if we've done this correctly, if I haven't made any typos, let's run this and we'll see. If I do color, yay, it all turns red. Great. So what this function call does, when you click on the color button, the HTML says, call this G function in JavaScript. Okay, so the G function says, scan the document, find the tag with the ID P1, that's going to be that paragraph, and change its style, change the color attribute of its style attribute to red, which is what happens, right? So basically all that text in there becomes red. Next thing we're going to do is variables. So JavaScript variables are indicated by the word var. I always call it var, which is probably an old guy thing to do. Modern usage seems to prefer to call it var, just for the sake of butchering the English language, but it is what it is. So I'll call it var, and I apologize in advance if you don't like it. So to specify a variable named x, for example, in JavaScript, you first have to declare it, which means giving it a name. And if you want, you can assign it an initial value. So if you have some statement like var x, then your program is going to know, oh, x, when I see it, indicates a variable. And unlike a lot of other programming languages, JavaScript allows you to very flexibly shift from one type of data to another. So the same var, without changing the variable name itself or anything else. If you want to go from assigning it a text string to a floating point number, to an integer, to a true false variable. You can do all sorts of things like that without actually having to do any real changes to the variable itself. In many other languages, that's not the case. Okay. Anyway, so we're going to do the action here. So with the HTML code already in place, add some extra code. So down below, we're going to do this. We're going to do br button on click equals f of x, fx rather, a little math talk there. And then once I'm done typing this, then I'll explain it. The white space, by the way, doesn't matter. So there's extra spacing in the text of the document, but that doesn't really affect how things run. So I'm going to keep stuff pretty close together. And now our script tag. Let's stretch this out a bit. Okay, so what happens in this one, right, when I run it, there's going to be a button. When you click on it, it calls this f function, and it sends along the value x. Well, in the script here, ugh, go away, stupid ad. Ugh. Okay, it's when I call this function, it's going to send along the value of x. Now here in the script, right, the script is going to run kind of before it'll run definitely before anyone can click on that button. So var x will be assigned a value of 0. So when I first click it, it'll send along whatever the current value of x is, which will be 0. That value will be received at the function and named within that function y. So it'll receive essentially the number 0. At that point, I'll say x equals y plus 1. Well, since I sent along x and just renamed it y, that basically means x is going to add 1 to itself. So it'll go from 0 to 1. Then I'm going to scan the document, find the tag with the ID val, which is right here, the second button, and I'm going to set its inner HTML to equal x, so whatever the number is. Okay, so when I run this, I can, right, initially I have these two buttons, add and value. Value doesn't do anything when I click on it. I can click on that all day, nothing's going to happen. But this one, add, ta-da, goes to 1, 2, I can keep on clicking it, however many times. Okay. Next thing, intervals. So suppose you want to set a timer for your web page. Well, JavaScript has ways to do that too. So one of the ones to set a timer is the set interval function. The set interval function basically specifies a function that gets called with a certain periodicity. So how many milliseconds it's going to get called on. So we're going to do one that sets up some code for a timer. I'm going to put it here. Okay, we just copy in this stuff, br button, ID equals B, click equals H. I guess I didn't include the semicolon to close that out, but it'll still work. Whoop, something just happened. I hope I didn't typo anything. Okay, I hope it's all good. Okay, then here, script, var x equals 0, function H. Okay, so inside there, I'm gonna put in some offsets. Oh, I already closed that out. Fine. And then close out the script tag. Okay, so I'm going to walk through this. So when I add this stuff to the new page, when I update it, there's going to be a button with the ID B, and when I click on it, it's going to call this function H. Okay, like I said, it really should have a semicolon there, even though the lab exercise doesn't have it. Okay, but it'll run okay without one. So this script, first of all, I set X equal to 0. All right, it's going to be X either way, right? We have a little bit of duplication here. But when I call this function, right, anytime something clicks on that timer button, I'm going to do this. There's going to be this function H that gets called. It's going to call this set interval function. And set interval function has an embedded function within it. So this code is what's going to happen. So first of all, I'm going to have a variable y with the label time, and then divide x by 10. So whatever x is, boom, it's going to be x divided by 10. And if 10 is, if x divided by 10 is 0, then I'm just going to append dot 0. Otherwise, y is going to equal y plus s, right? So if x is 1, x divided by 10 is going to be 0.1. If x is 2, x divided by 10 is going to be 0.2, and so on. So, and if x is 0, right? If it's some multiple of 10, I'm going to add on 0 at the end. So this is going to show tenths of seconds. Then y is going to add on some more text to that string. So it's going to say time plus the number of tenths of seconds, okay? Then I'm going to say y equals y plus this. Oof, okay. So let's see how this goes. And then afterwards, I'm going to increment x by 1, because this is happening every 100 milliseconds. So each time I go through this, I'm going to add, you know, a different multiple of x. I'm going to add +1 onto it, or 0.1 onto it. So I got this timer, and there we go. Okay, so what I'm doing, again, dividing x by 10, and then I'm checking to see if x is a multiple of 10, in which case, you know, say if x actually gets up to 10, it's going to say just 1, but I want to read 1.0. So if x is a multiple of 10, I'm going to add on the text 0.0 at the end, and then the s for the seconds. And just keep on going for as long as you like. Okay, now the last part of this is something you get to do on your own. So we've done image files before in HTML. So over here, you have an image tag. The ID is going to say square, and the source is going to be redsquare.jpg, right? So what you want to set up to happen is that the script will display the blue square.jpg image instead of the red square when someone clicks on the image button. So up here in the image button, right, you're going to have to set an onclick command that makes it happen. You're going to have to, well, one way to do it is with a function, or you could just do it within, you know, that onclick attribute itself. But basically, you're going to have to find which tag has the square ID, and then you're going to have to set its src, its source property, to equal the blue square.jpg file. Okay, and then the last thing you'll have to do to make sure it works, make sure that you have those red square and blue square images downloaded to the same folder wherever your code is. So copy all this code into a notepad file, and then update that last one, that last image button, to have that proper onclick. Okay, and then you get to zip that and upload it to Blackboard whenever you're done. Cool. All right, good luck. And thank you for your attention.